Hey there, 8th graders. I'd like to talk to you about the next step in your Doodle for Google project. So let's just review the materials that I have here. I've obviously got my drawing. I have got a pencil. I've got a nice big eraser. If you don't have a nice big eraser, that's okay. And then I decided that I wanted to outline my drawing with an ultra-fine tip Sharpie. That is not a required step. It is up to you whether or not you think that will help your drawing. And then lastly, I'm gonna choose to add some color today, and I'm gonna do that with colored pencils. Ooh, so pretty. Now, if you don't have colored pencils at home, that's okay. You're also welcome to use markers, or if you have another material on hand that you think would work well, you could use that too. Now, before I get started with my coloring, I did want to talk to you about some common mistakes that you can make when you're coloring, whether it's with colored pencils or any other kind of material. So these are the things you want to watch out for. Number 1, coloring outside the lines. That's obviously a very common thing to have happen. It doesn't look so great. It kind of makes the edges of whatever item you're coloring look a little bit fuzzy. Mistake number 2, stopping short of the lines. So this is the same concept. Instead of going outside of the lines, you're stopping short, probably because you're afraid of going outside of the lines. We've also got uneven pressure. That's another really common thing that I see when I see students color things in. So what you want to do is make sure when you're coloring, you don't want to have spots that look really dark and then spots that look really light. You want the whole thing to look like it's a nice, even, consistent color. Gaps and directional change. So again, whether you're coloring with colored pencils or markers or something else, you want to try to avoid seeing where that material changed direction, and you also want to make sure there are not small gaps in your coloring. This is normally avoided by just slowing yourself down a little bit and also making smaller movements with whatever item you're coloring with. So down here you can see we've got, yay, nice and even. This circle right here, the coloring is not outside the lines, it's not stopping short. The pressure is fairly even and we do not see any gaps or directional change. Now we do see a small amount of little white speckles, and that's just mostly from the texture of the paper. I am not including those sorts of things when I talk about gaps and directional change. All right, so let's go ahead and start to talk about actually adding color. So I'm gonna start with these 3 colors here. I'm gonna be making the thread purple. I'm gonna be making the scissors a gray color. And then I'm gonna be making the spool over here for my thread, sort of a wood grain brown color. So let's start first with the scissors. I'm gonna set these 2 off to the side. Now before you start coloring, I do recommend always checking, making sure you've got a nice sharp tip, especially if you're using a colored pencil. And then make sure you do in fact like the color that you're using, so you might want to test your colors out on a small piece of paper to the side. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my gray and I'm gonna start out by kind of outlining this section here. Just going right along the edge. And what I'm doing is I'm essentially kind of creating a barrier for myself. This technique is gonna help those first 2 items that I just showed you on that page that had some very common mistakes that you can make when you are using colored pencils. This will help with going outside the lines and also stopping short of the lines. We're creating a spot right along the edge here, and when you see yourself come upon this edge, you know that you need to stop coloring, and that way you'll stay inside the lines. So let's come right up to this edge here. And then I'm gonna start filling in the center. All right. Now, when I go to fill in the center, I want to be careful. I don't want to make it look like there is a dark outline around the edge. I want to make sure I've got that nice even pressure that we just talked about. So when I go to fill in the center, notice I'm using small movements. My hand isn't moving really, really big, and it's also not going too quickly. Smaller movements can help you control the pencil, and not going too quickly is obviously also going to help you control the pencil. Now, if you see me go back over another spot, I'm not putting a whole lot of pressure down. That's another thing you want to watch out for. You can always make your coloring darker if you want to, but if you make it too dark right off the bat because you're pressing down really, really hard, you're probably going to make your hand kind of hurt because that's a lot of pressure to put on your hand and on the pencil. And if you end up not loving the color, there's not a great way to fix it. If you press down really, really hard, the chances of you doing any kind of erasing or changing of the color is probably not going to work. All right, I'm going to slow down a little bit as I come up to that detail in the scissors. And just make sure everything looks nice and smooth. All right, well that part's finished right there. Next, I'm gonna show you a little trick if you wanna add a bit of dimension. All right, so for the next step, I did go ahead and color in the other side of the blade in my scissors because I'm gonna add a little bit of shadowing. Now, I'm not gonna make this a requirement, but if you think it will really help your drawing look nice, here's a little trick for you. You can do this one of two ways. Now, I'm gonna start off by taking that same gray color. I've got one blade here that's kind of overlapping the blade right next to it. So here's what I'm gonna do to try to make it look like there is a shadow being cast on that second blade of my scissors. I'm gonna add another layer right here, and I'm gonna press down a little bit harder just in that section. I'm gonna bring it all the way up here. And then I'm gonna make it kind of, I know there's not a huge section there where I've left it lighter. I'm gonna try to make it fade into that section so there's not a real clear line between where I pressed down and where I left it a little bit lighter. So I'm gonna ease up as I get towards the edge of that portion of the scissors. All right. Now, if I want to go further still, I could grab an even darker color. Now, because I'm using gray, my darker color right now is black. Black's a pretty dark color, so I'm going to want to be careful here. But you could use this technique with a lighter green and a darker green, a pink and a red. So any lighter and darker version of a color. So I'm going to come in and then right along that edge there, I'm gonna really carefully and without pressing down too hard, add just a very light layer of black right along that edge where those two blades come together. Again, I am not pressing down too hard, trying to make sure that I don't make it too dark because I'll have a hard time undoing it. Remember, you can always make things darker if you want to. All right, bring it all the way up here. And then again, I'm gonna ease up, just barely kind of skim the pencil along the paper as I go towards the edge of the blade of the scissors. All right. So that is a technique that you can use to add dimension, shading, or shadowing into your drawing. So let's go ahead and get the rest of this colored in. All right, 8th graders, here is my finished doodle for Google. I'm super excited to see what you all come up with. I hope you have fun. Bye.